Hey everyone, happy Thursday to you. I'm Pastor Chelsea and you're watching The Thursday Show. And not only that, but today's episode is the 40th episode of The Thursday Show that has been created. And so it's a pretty special one to me. Today's episode also marks the last one that we're going to be having for the summer season before we start back up with season 2 in September. And so it's put me in this really reflective, nostalgic place as I'm reflecting on all the different episodes that we've had. I think through the very first one, Faith Looks Forward. It was the one that started it all and the one that I did not feel ready to launch with, but it was the one that we began with. And then from there, we did the book study on Get Out of Your Head. We did the Christmas Advent series. We interviewed all sorts of different people. We've had Pastor Dan, Pastor Ann, my husband Adam, Travis from the Counseling Center, Mindy, Jenny, so many great interviews, so many great conversations. And so I'm curious, as today we're in this episode of reflection, what has been your favorite episode of The Thursday Show? Or maybe you've had a couple that really stuck out. If you've had one that was special to you or a message that you just really needed to hear when it came, would you share that in the comments and just tell me what your favorite episode has been? As I look back over the past year, I can really see how God has taught me so much through creating The Thursday Show. What's amazing though is I feel like He put that heart and that passion for it inside me even years ago. I remember still being in student ministry, so probably 5 or 6 years ago, and just feeling like God was drawing something out in me to create. Something to create like a podcast or a place for weekly content. And at the time, I just didn't have the space in my schedule to do all the work that would go into it, recording, setting up, producing, editing. And so I recognized that stirring, but I wasn't able to act on it yet. And so back then, about a year ago, when conversations were in place for me to become the new online ministries pastor and step out of student ministries, that idea came back to the surface again. And I thought, well, Lord, maybe is this the space where you want me to create something like that? I don't even know what it would look like. I don't even know if I have anything worth saying, really. Do people want to hear what I have to say? And I remember one day I was working on ideas for online ministries, and Pastor Dan came to my office and he said, hey, have you ever thought about creating a weekly video or podcast or something for the church? I think you should do that in your new role in online ministries. It's so incredible how God just gives us that confirmation right in the moment we need it. And so after hearing that, I knew that this was something that God wanted me to do. Didn't know how to do it, had a lot of learning to do, but I knew I just needed to begin. So I think it was back in October of last year that the very first episode of The Thursday Show began. I did not feel ready, did not feel equipped, and didn't really know what I was doing, but I knew that God would give me the answers as I needed them. From there, developing content week after week, God really taught me so much about consistency, about how even when we don't know how to do things, if we keep doing them faithfully and obediently, He teaches us what we need. He also did a lot of work in me of God has to teach me things in order for me to be able to teach others things. And so God's been doing a lot to just teach me in my own personal life so that then I have content and lessons worth sharing with other people. He's taught me through my mistakes. He's taught me through my wins, but either way, I'm so thankful for all that God has done through The Thursday Show, just in my own personal development. But what I love is God hasn't created this just for my sake and growth. I've also seen how God has been doing so much work in the lives of others through this medium of The Thursday Show. I wanted to take some time today to share some of the amazing God stories of what God has done through The Thursday Show. You've already heard me share that God's taught me tremendously through it. Well, it's been encouraging to read through some of the emails, through the surveys, and just hear feedback from people on what God has done through this medium. So I remember back in the fall in the thankfulness episode, and Carrie from our church messaged saying that God really impressed on her to start practicing gratitude and thankfulness in her family. And so she actually created a thankfulness tree in her home that she and her kids and her husband could all participate in, writing down things that they were thankful for. I also heard from Matt, who loved the Power of Words episode, and he shared with Pastor Dan how it was exactly what he needed to hear at that moment in that week. And I love how God does that. Like when I'm creating content, when I'm creating these episodes, I really do it prayerfully, asking God to lead me to the right message for that week. And so it's so cool hearing these stories of how God did exactly that. I also heard just a huge response from the episode where Mindy Sharon shares her story of grief and loss and just how God has been doing that refining work in her. So many people would stop me in church and talk about how much it resonated with them, because in this world we do go through suffering and loss. As you know, I've also been asking for some responses through a survey over the past couple weeks, and I've had a couple really cool testimonials that have come in through that survey, which, side note, if you would still like to participate in the survey, the link for it is in the description, and you can just follow that, just a few simple questions to give me feedback as I prepare for the next season. But I wanted to share 2 testimonies that came in from those surveys. Both of these were anonymous, since the whole survey is anonymous. But here is the first piece of feedback. An anonymous survey sharing how God really taught them how to share their faith through the Thursday episode. This is what they said. A recent Thursday show episode called Sharing Your Story has really helped me start to share my testimony of how God has thoroughly impacted my life. I've always been scared to share my testimony because I always thought that no one would believe me and what God has done in my life so far. But thanks to that episode of the Thursday show, I have become more encouraged to share my testimony with people near and far and to share how God can work in small ways in their lives too. That's the whole reason that this is something that we create as a church, is to hear how God can do mighty big things through the simple medium of video. Another testimony I want to share from you that came in from the surveys was about the Fresh Starts episode that happened just a couple weeks ago. This is what this survey said. Today you spoke about new beginnings, fresh starts. Well, I just started moving the first boxes from the home that I've lived in for 37 years to an apartment. My head and emotions are still struggling with this because it's not something I had expected at this time, but you have encouraged me so very much. Your words today have been so important, and I thank you so much. It is so amazing to hear how God can work through mighty ways. And I've so loved getting to hear these testimonials, getting to read the comments and the emails that come in from the episodes of the Thursday show. So please keep on commenting and please keep on sending those. And please keep on letting God use this medium to change lives. So you've heard a little bit of what God has done in me through this year. You've heard what God has done in some other lives through the Thursday show. Well, I feel like in a season finale, it's only appropriate to reflect, but also to look forward. You know, back to the pilot episode, faith moves forward, and that's exactly what I want to do. I want to let everything that God has done this year be a foundation for what He's going to build upon in the fall and in the coming years. And so I've had a couple ideas about topics that I would like to cover in the future. But I would also love to hear your feedback and hear what are topics that you want addressed. What are things that you want to hear more about what the Bible says or teaches on? And so if you have ideas on topics that I could cover or that you would like addressed, well, just leave a comment and tell me what topic it is that you want to hear more about. But here's a couple ideas that I've had just brainstorming. I think it would be so important for us to talk about biblical foundations of our faith. As a church, we have some key theological pillars that we as Colonial Woods, as the missionary church, are built upon. And so I would love to break those down a little bit and talk about them so that anybody who attends here or is a part of our church family online or in person knows a little bit more of the theology that they're standing on. I also would love to do a deeper dive into how to study God's Word for yourself. We talked about it a little bit in this season on the Soap and the Bible episode, but I feel like this is something that there's so many ways to study the Bible and so much you can learn as you study the Bible that I would love to build on that and give some more tips, some more ideas, maybe even show how to do word studies, looking at the original languages the Bible was written in. So you'll have to let me know if that's something that resonates with you. A couple other ideas I wanted to cover. I want to do some more interviews. I especially want to get Pastor Phil in for an interview, and also want to do a separate interview with his wife Tammy, because I feel like hearing the heart of our senior pastor is crucial, and hearing the heart of the senior pastor's wife is a very unique perspective, because Tammy is in a very unique role, and she does ministry in our church that a lot of people might not realize that she does. I also want to do more interviews with Katie and with Pastor Katie and Pastor Ann, and talk about what it's like being a woman in ministry. I know that that's a hot topic. I also want to bring in Pastor Ryan and some of our worship team and have conversations about why worship is important and why we worship the way we worship. And then this came in from a survey, but I want to talk about how people can get more involved at Colonial Woods. I know sometimes that can feel kind of like an obstacle when it comes to, getting to know a church more. Well, I want to make it really simple on how you can get more involved in your church. So those are just a couple topics I'm thinking about talking about. If one of those sounds extra good to you, let me know in the comments, or if you have a different idea on what I should talk about in the future, please leave a comment and let me know. And I can't stress enough how much it helps when you guys leave those comments, because that really helps me gauge whether or not the content we're creating is helpful to you or not. Lastly, in today's episode, I had a request from one of the surveys that I provide some resources for you. Since the Thursday show won't be airing every Thursday throughout the summer, I don't want you to feel like you have nothing to go to watch, to learn from. And so we have a couple great resources that I want to recommend to you. The first one, which maybe you knew about it, maybe you didn't, but as Colonial Woods, we pay for a subscription to Right Now Media. And so anyone who's affiliated with our church is allowed to create a free account under our name. So Right Now Media they call it kind of like the Netflix of Christian Bible studies. So many great resources, thousands of resources on there. Bible studies, videos kids can watch, studies on all sorts of different topics. And so it's really just a matter of logging in and seeing what catches your eye. A couple great authors and communicators that are on there would be Jenny Allen, Francis Chan, Craig Groeschel, and so many others. So if you haven't created a free account, you should totally check that out. You can do that from our church website or from our church app. Now, another great resource that you have access to that maybe you didn't realize is our Colonial Woods church app. It recently went through a bit of a facelift, and so it now has a media library function where you can go back and you can look at past sermons that maybe you didn't get to hear and you want to revisit them. You can also easily access the Thursday show library. You can access Pastor Ann's Bible studies. And so that's another great place full of great content where you can stay connected and stay learning this summer. Another great resource that you have this summer is to simply read. Reading is so crucial and so helpful to our spiritual lives and personal growth. And so I highly recommend that you find a book this summer that you want to dive into. If you need a couple recommendations, in episode 38, I listed out 5 great books that I would totally recommend. So go back and check those out. So as we close up this season of the Thursday show and close up this episode, I just want to take a moment to thank you for giving me a little bit of time on your Thursdays, giving me the opportunity to share what God is doing in my life with you, and thank you for the opportunity of sharing what God is doing in your life with me. As we head out from here, I want to just read Psalm 118, verse 24 over you today and every day of the summer that's ahead of us. This is the day that the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. As you go throughout your summer, there'll be days that are high, probably days that are low, but each and every single day, Thursday through Thursday, is a gift. And we can rejoice and be glad in it. I hope you have an amazing summer full of amazing Thursdays, and I will see you starting September 16th. Talk soon.